Hello and welcome to the British Tapper, and today we're talking about the art of tailored style. So a couple of weeks ago I got asked a very interesting question in the feedback on one of my videos, and it was about how do you spot a quality suit, jacket or trousers. And it's a very subjective thing, this, but I'm going to talk along several avenues, if you like. So the first one is anybody that wears a suit or a jacket and a pair of trousers in this day and age, then they get my thumbs up to start with. My channel is about encouraging people to wear that sort of thing. Whether they wear it really well or badly is another thing altogether. And I'd like to think that by just making the effort, they've taken the first step on a sartorial journey. And I would always encourage people to do that. And I think people do over time. They get their own taste, they develop their own understanding of what looks good and what doesn't look good on them. So if I start off, first of all, talking about the very entry level, the very basic level. So we're talking about somebody that has purchased a suit, probably it will be off the rack, off the peg if you like, and it might be because financially they can't afford much more, or because the circumstances mean they can't save up for something, so they have to buy something pretty instantaneously. So in that case, there are a few things that I would recommend you consider. And along this journey, I'm also going to talk about the further end of the journey where you'll start to look at bespoke suits being made for you. The in-between area is a grey area where you get made to measure. You get people that buy off-the-rack suits and get the buttonholes restitched to make them look like they're bespoke. So it is quite a complicated area. And of course, when we talk about suits, then that could be broken down into constituent parts of either a jacket or a pair of trousers. So when I talk about suits, then I'm talking about jackets and trousers in its entirety. So when it comes to a suit, obviously, if you're buying off the rack, there are a few things you really need to consider. And the foremost thing I would always mention is fit. And that means it's a reasonably good fit. So it goes across the shoulders well, there's no gapping at the side or at the back of the neck, and no gaping here. Nice flat lapels, and the button stance is just right. And I would say that the button tends to fall either above, slightly above or slightly below the actual belly button, depending on the style of the button arrangement. To start with, let's just talk about suits in general. So we have a thing called a canvas, which is actually underneath the outer fabric of the suit or jacket. Now, a canvas is made up of a number of things, a number of materials brought together in a weave. And also with that, you can also have in that horsehair or camel hair as an example. Camel hair is a lot softer and more malleable and more flexible, so you get a much more, arguably a refined finish on the actual suit. However, what I would say is be more interested in, has it got a canvas or not? Has it got a half canvas or a full canvas? So when we talk about full canvas, as you can see here, it goes across from the shoulders down to the lower chest area, and then you get two side panels coming down the front of the jacket. Now that extra padding, if you like, is designed to give you more structure in the suit, make it look firmer and more supportive, so you get a much better fit. In that you'll also get padding in the shoulders as well, yeah, and that gives it a much more structured feel. But when we come to the canvas, a lot of people talk about this thing called fused canvas. Okay, now even bespoke suits will have full canvas, but where they don't use the canvas, sometimes they will use what's called a fused material. Now this is basically a panel of additional material that is added to the outer fabric, and it's generally ironed on or heated up to around about 120, 150 degrees Celsius, and it basically is a very light covered area of glue on the actual material, and it fuses through the heat to the outer material, or potentially, depending where it is, on the inner material. All suits, or the majority of even handmade suits, have an element of fused material in it. Obviously, the less fused material used in it, the better the quality of the suit, because then you're talking about the proper canvas and the stitching in the canvas. So when it comes to the stitching of the canvas, this panel here, the stitching goes in this direction, and the idea is to give it rigidity, but give it stretch this way, but rigidity in this direction. But from the breast area down to the belly area, this goes the opposite direction, and this is to give it rigidity around the belly area, but gives it flexibility this way in the stretch of the lower part of the jacket. And if it's a full canvas, it will have two panels running down the front of the lower part of the jacket, just to give it that rigidity in where the front of the pockets are, down to the bottom of the jacket. Now, majority of suits you buy from a store will tend to be at best half canvas, and that means it just comes to where the rib cage is, basically the lower part of the rib cage, and then you'll have nothing from there on. Maybe a little bit of extra fused material we were talking about, just to give it a little bit more thickness and give it a little bit more structure, but that's as good as it's going to get. Suits will only be half canvas, or some will not even have any canvassing at all. The other thing to bear in mind is the climate you live in, or where you're going to be wearing that suit. So for example, if you're in a very hot climate, you don't really want to have a lot of thick material on top of your chest and body area, because it's going to create heat and retain heat. So you probably want something a bit more breathable, less structured, much looser. Whereas if you're in a more temperate climate and your suit is more for the 3-season wear, then you're going to be having something maybe half canvassed, lined, a little bit of padding in the shoulders maybe, and that's fine for most temperate climates. And something to consider is the lining as well. If you're in a very warm climate, then you probably don't want any lining at all. You want it very informal, no canvassing, to let as much air through the material as possible. So when it comes to the trousers, then again, we have, with a suit, it's going to be matching material, the same material in the suit, outer of the suit is going to be the same used on the trousers itself. Now you can have different fastenings, you can have belt loops for a belt, you could have side tabs for side adjustments, or you could have buttons for braces. Now you can have pleated, unpleated, None of this really changes the quality of the material, it's just the style and the fit of the trouser. When it comes to the length of the trouser, I would always say adjust them or buy them that fit you on the inside leg so that the break comes just on the shoe. If it's too much, then you get that pooling effect and it doesn't look good. After going through all that effort of buying nice shoes and nice tie, spending all that money on a suit and then not wanting to spend a little money just to get that final bit done, it really does spoil the look. When we talk about the materials used, this is really where the money comes into it. Not only the tailoring costs if you're talking about bespoke, but if you're buying a suit, then it's the materials. So if it's got a lot of man-made fibres in it, then chances are it's going to be a little bit cheaper. If you're talking about milled wool materials, cottons, linens, blends, for example, where you've got wool, cashmere, you've got silks, you've got mohair, all those different exotic materials mixed in the weave, then that's where the money's really going to come into it. So when you're looking in that label, have a look at what the outer material was made of. I would always suggest try and go for natural fibres if you can. They are a little bit more expensive, but they do wear well. And I would also suggest you don't go for a fused canvas. Now, if you've had a suit for any length of time and it's a fused canvas, you'll get this effect potentially, where you get a blistering effect on the outer fabric. And this is where the glue that's attached to the outer part of the garment, fused to the canvas with that glue breaks down after a while and you get those little blisters. It's very rare. You can get it repaired in some cases, but it's very expensive to do. I have heard of people actually injecting glue back in the blisters and resealing it. I have heard of people heating up the iron and re-sticking those blisters down. But in truth, once it gets to that stage, it's only a question of time before it will come back again and again and then again. So by avoiding that fused canvas, you could save yourself a lot of pain and get a lot more wear out of your suit. Whilst the outer fabric may be really lovely material and last you decades, once you get that blistering effect, you're going to not really want to wear that suit. So one thing you can do is the pinch test. So you can pinch the outer material and you should be able to feel it move between the inner and the outer fabric. And if you feel a resistance there, then chances are it's fused. You should be able to feel the inner, outer and the actual canvas in between, and you should be able to feel that floating around in between. And that's a good indicator you've got a jacket that's a non-fused canvas on the suit. With the trousers, you also have linings on the trousers. So a lot of trousers nowadays, they have no lining in them at all. So it's just the material. Some have half linings which go down to around the knee area or just below it. And this is to give a little bit more harder wear in the actual thigh area of the trousers. Or full lining which goes to the full length of the trousers. Although that's not so common in this day and age. But again, it's all about retaining rigidity and structure throughout the trouser. So when it comes to that, it's more about the fabric that gives you that quality finish. Then it depends on who's made the suit. So if you're buying off the rack, chances are it's going to be made abroad, because it's so much cheaper to have them mass produced abroad. If you're talking about made to measure, then you're potentially again going to get it maybe measured up in the UK, but it might be sent away to a factory abroad or somewhere in the UK. Either way, it'll be a factory environment and they will make it to your measurements. And then it's sent back to the store for you to try on, or sent to you directly to try on. The top end of the scale of the sartorial journey is to end up with bespoke suits, handmade suits for you, which requires you to go into a tailor's, have a consultation with them, have a talk with them. He'll ask you a lot of questions about what you want the suit for, the sort of activities that you do, and do you drive a car? Do you spend a lot of time in a car? Do you sit at meals? Do you have a lot of sit-down meetings? And this all depends, because he's trying to weigh up the best way of making that suit to give you the best possible fit for all eventualities. So, for example, if you spend a lot of time sitting and the suit rides up because the back of the jacket's raised up, and you get this gaping effect at the back, it's not going to be a good look when you're in the boardroom or in the office. So he wants to know, and he may do a sitting. In other words, when he does a fitting, he'll do a sitted fitting. So he'll ask you to sit down and he'll have a look at it and maybe make some minor adjustments in the making process. If you spend a lot of time in a car, and I would always suggest, if you're going to do any long journeys in a car, always take your jacket off, always put it on a hanger and hang it up in the back of the car. Don't throw it on the back seat because it gets wrinkled, and chances are, if it's in my car, it might even pick up dog fur. So always hang it up, keep it in as good a condition as possible, so when you come out of the car you can put it on and look exactly how you want to, nice, clean, presented. So as I said, it's a very subjective subject about what is a quality suit, because a lot of the time it comes into budget. So if we go to the next step up from buying in store, and we're talking about made to measure, then you can ask for either set buttons, or you can have working buttons. You can have a change in the lapel shape. The gorge could be changed as well, and the width of the actual lapel. You can have a buttonhole, handmade, machine made, or a Milanese buttonhole, which obviously each one's going up in style, and they're going to cost money because they're a lot more difficult to do. You can choose between whether you want single-breasted, double-breasted. The same with the trousers. You could choose between a standard tailored fit, a tapered fit. You could go for a cuffed or uncuffed at the bottom. In the UK we tend to call it a turn-up. Generally a turn-up's around about 1 1/3 inches, but some people will go to a 2-inch turn-up. But if you're a short person, then be very wary about the turn-up. Sometimes you're better off with a straight trouser. And if you are going to have a turn-up on it, it tends to go better with a tapered leg finish. So it's just something to consider when you're going through that process of weighing up what you do and do not want. When it comes to going into bespoke suit design, then we are really talking about, again, it still comes down to budget, because you can spend anything from £4,000 to £10,000 in a relatively easy way. So you need to measure how much can you afford. I would always suggest, though, no matter what end of the scale you are at, that you try and buy the best you can get for your money. So when it comes to the buttonholes on the cuff, there are a few things to take into consideration. So for example, if it's a working cuff, that gives an element of sophistication. But also the quality of the buttons used. Are they horn buttons? Are they plastic? And the way they're stitched, for example, is a good indicator of a quality suit. Also the number of buttons. So for example, 1 being the most informal button, going to 2, 3 or 4 buttons on the cuff. 4 being the most formal of wears. You can also get cloth covered buttons instead of horn or other materials, but they tend to be used as a cheap alternative. Now you can have the buttons actually placed in a row, or you can have them in a row where they're actually kissing, touching each other, or you can have what's called stacked buttons. So they're slightly overlapping each other button. And they're just a few examples of the different layouts you can have on the cuff. So something else to consider is the actual buttonhole itself in the lapel. And there's something significant about that, because my uncle, who was a tailor for many years, explained to me about the subtleties of that buttonhole. And that tells, that has almost a secret code to other tailors about the quality of the workmanship, and some are very ornate. In other words, a lot of effort goes into that buttonhole, showing their skills and expertise. And they can be just hand sewn or very elaborately embroidered to give it a very special finish. We mentioned earlier about Milanese buttonholes. Well, that's where a little piece of wire filament is used, and then over the top of that it's embroidered, and you get that raised stitched effect. If you're talking about experimenting and you're starting off, then maybe consider second hand instead of brand new. And when you go second hand, you might be able to get something that's even better quality than off the peg, that may have been made to measure, or even a bespoke suit made for somebody. And if they're very similar size to you, then the chances are you're going to get a really good fitting suit for a peppercorn price. Of course, you can spend as much money as you like on a suit, but it really does come down to other things like the accessories you use with it. For today, I'm wearing a very informal watch, and it's picked up some of the blue hues that I'm wearing in the tie and the pocket square and the shirt. The actual suit has got a blue overcheck through the Prince of Wales. So it ties those little things together. Finally, what really sets a good suit off is a good pair of shoes. So don't be afraid to spend some money on those shoes. So these are my very informal views on tailoring and what to look for when you're buying a suit, especially when you're buying your first suit. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe, then please feel free to do so. If you'd like to make a contribution to the channel, then we have a Buy Me a Coffee page, and I'll put a link down below so that if you'd like to make a financial contribution, you can do so. We love constructive comments, so if you'd like to make a comment, then jot it down below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And if you have any ideas or views on what you'd like us to cover in the future, then why not jot them down there, and we'll have a look at them and see if we can fit them in the next few videos. So until next time, take care.